Hare Krishna. Recently, I did a program with the Bhaktivedanta University of Russia, and devotees asked some questions that I did not answer. Somehow, the time ran out and I didn't answer all the questions. So I am going to answer those questions now. So the first one is from Devaki Nandana Das from Kazakhstan. And he asks, I'd mentioned in my talk about the Committee of 50 that during the Guru reform period, there was a committee of 50 devotees who were supposed to figure out what to do with these gurus and whether, since they had committed such grave sins, such as, anyway, won't be sarcastic here, that the ones who survived, the gurus who were still active, what should be done with them and so on. And so the question from Devaki Nandana is, could you say how long did this transition period last when the Committee of 50 began to follow you or deal with me? And how did that meeting end when you were summoned one by one? The committee was formed, I forget exactly what year it was, whether it was 1987 or 88, I can't remember exactly what year, but I remember more or less that it was basically one, they met themselves and they were, figure out what should we do now with ISKCON and what do we do with these gurus? And so when they called me into their room to interview me, as I explained then I did not threaten them and I did not flatter them, which seemed to be the two methods that were most successful, threatening them or flattering them. I just tried to tell the truth, and they weren't very happy with that. Although, in retrospect, I think it obviously was the truth. But in any case, after that, the committee itself, I think, didn't really, they might have, I don't think it met very much. I don't remember exactly. Probably Ravindra Sarup would know. But after that, I continued to serve as a guru, but because the new rules and principles were making it difficult to continue the very, very successful preaching that we had going on in Brazil. And so I remained as GBC, but basically retired because I felt that that these reformers were destroying the conditions which were necessary, which had enabled me or enabled our yatra in Brazil to become definitely one of the most successful yatras in the world by every measure. I mean, book distribution champions, we had one of the best gurukulas in the world, we were buying farms, we were making many devotees by every, and not only external measures, just by the measure of people staying in the movement, people being faithful to Prabhupada, attracting leading citizens. I think by every possible measure, it was very successful. And it was damaged by the reform of ISKCON. So anyway, Pavana from Russia, what has helped you stay in touch with Srila Prabhupada during all these challenging times which you described to us? I always understood that Prabhupada was one thing, and then his followers, who, we were all imperfect, but his followers were something else. I never, I think, was confused about that. And so if some people in the name of Prabhupada did things which I consider to be inappropriate or harmful for ISKCON. I never thought that Prabhupada was doing that. And ultimately, my strongest commitment was to Prabhupada and to his movement. I never thought that ISKCON belonged to these people. I never thought it belonged to me. I always understood ISKCON as Prabhupada's movement. And so, however imperfectly we're serving Prabhupada, there is still an ISKCON, which is Prabhupada's mission. And I have to serve Prabhupada and his mission, no matter how well or how badly Prabhupada is being represented. Because as I said, in ISKCON, everything may happen. Anyone can burn. So yeah, that's sort of the interesting way to put it. But yeah, we have to be very firmly committed to Prabhupada and ISKCON, even if some people in the name of Prabhupada and ISKCON are acting, let us say, imperfectly. So then Karabhajana Das from Uzbekistan. What lesson should we, the third generation of devotees, third generation, learn from your personal and ISKCON's history? Please highlight a few points that are most important. Okay, interesting question. Well, one obvious lesson we should learn is not to go to extremes, to remain balanced and moderate. So some gurus went to one extreme and then reformers went to the opposite extreme. Neither of these was healthy for ISKCON. So I think an important lesson is to be balanced. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yuktahara viharasya, we should be balanced in all of our activities, eating, sleeping, recreation, and in our service also, we should avoid extremes, remain balanced. Another lesson is that if we believe that some reform is necessary in ISKCON, and that's natural in every institution from time to time, there has to be corrections because human beings make mistakes and sometimes institutions make mistakes. And so it's natural that periodically there have to be corrections or adjustments. But again, it's sort of the same point. We should really pay attention to the consequences. We should not just, so to speak, burn the house down. Like that old saying, the operation, the surgery was a success, but the patient died. So we should be mature and experienced and pay attention to the consequences of our so-called corrections and not just become blindly idealistic. Of course, we do have ideals and we should follow our ideals, but we should be very careful about not doing more harm than good in the name of, correcting things. Ananta Shesha from Russia. Thank you, all of you, for your kind words. I'd like to ask you to point out the main things that could keep ISKCON united and we could avoid the fate of the Gaudia Math and other organizations which are divided into many. Perhaps the main thing is to understand how important it is to keep ISKCON united. If someone doesn't understand that, if someone doesn't understand how important it is to keep ISKCON united, then they don't understand Prabhupada. And there are unfortunately people in ISKCON, even people with leadership positions in some cases, that don't understand that. and how important it is to keep ISKCON united. That's the main thing, because if someone understands that, then there will always be problems. There will always be disagreements and conflicts. But among people, if you have a group of devotees, leaders, who really understand how important it is to keep ISKCON united, then they will find a way to cooperate. So I think that's the main point, just to understand the importance of unity. So, Anta Kela Das from the Ukraine. So he wrote, there is a quote in the ISKCON discipleship course, quote, so I have ordered that all my disciples should avoid all my godbrothers. You should not have any relations and communications with them. You should not give them my books or purchase their books, and also do not visit their temples. So please beware of them. That is from a letter to Vishwakarma in Bombay on November 9th, 1975. It looks like Bon Maharaj was meant here too. So my question, Maharaj, could you tell us about the context of this letter and what the events were that Srila Prabhupada expressed such a reaction to? In other words, what events was Prabhupada reacting to? Of course, that was a long history. Probably goes back to when Prabhupada first went to New York, and he couldn't get any of his godbrothers or Narayan Maharaj to help him. And then when ISKCON began to grow, and a lot of money came in, a lot of followers, it became a big thing. Suddenly, all these Gaudia Math people were very interested in ISKCON, and there were actually plots. It began with Chutananda, Prabhupada's disciple, who went to India very early, I think around 67 or 68, I can't remember, to avoid being drafted into the US military and having to go to Vietnam. So to avoid that, he went to India. And because there was no ISKCON in India at that time, he stayed with some of Prabhupada's godbrothers who contaminated him in various ways, wanted him to basically join them in a conspiracy against Prabhupada. Although I don't think Achyutananda fully understood what they were doing. But so I was with Prabhupada in perhaps it was 75, when the GBC, one day we went across the river, across the Ganga to Navadvip, to the ashram of Sridhar Swami, because there was some kind of celebration taking place or some program. They had invited us, and we went there. And they were, for me, it was a little hard physically. It was, it was very hot because India is hot, especially West Bengal most of the year. And they were speaking in Bengali, and I didn't really understand what was going on. So then we went back to our Mayapur compound, our campus, and Prabhupada called us. He had heard that we'd gone to the ashram of one of his godbrothers, and he was concerned. He said, so what happened? What did they say? And Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was always very, what's the word? He would always document everything. So he had recorded the program, and so he put a little a little cassette player on Prabhupada's desk, and he, hit the button and began to play for Prabhupada what he had recorded. It was some man speaking in Bengali. And at a certain point, Prabhupada stopped the tape and he said, "This person is offending me." It wasn't Sridhar Swami, but it was in the presence of Sridhar Swami, who did not stop this person. And so Prabhupada was disturbed, unhappy, and he said, "Do not ever go back there." So Prabhupada many times tried to engage his god brothers in helping ISKCON, but of course they never did. Not one of them ever. They would say Prabhupada's an avatar, Shaktived's avatar. They all saw that Prabhupada was the next great acharya, but they would never actually join him. And so Prabhupada made many efforts to invite them, to persuade them, but they never did. And it was always dangerous, so that when some ISKCON gurus in 1980, 81, were deviating, and some of them went to Sridhar Swami to get his support. I'm not accusing Sridhar Swami of acting against ISKCON, but definitely he was used by some of these people, former ISKCON gurus, and so it was always dangerous. It was never not dangerous. It was never just completely safe. And of course, there were some god brothers who were very, Prabhupada, who were very saintly persons who never caused any trouble to ISKCON, but too many of them did. And so Prabhupada, to protect his society from these people, he just said, as they say, good fences make good neighbors, just to avoid them. So next is Doyal Nitai Das from Vladivostok and Moscow. So could you please explain what is the reason that the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is commented in detail, but the 10th canto is not so detailed, although there are 10 commentaries of the Vaishnava Acharyas for the 10th canto? I believe I did it that way because I felt that Prabhupada had already done the 10th canto, in a sense, through the Krishna book. And the Krishna book does give, it's funny the way, Prabhupada said it's a summary study. He announced that it would be a summary study, but if you actually look closely at the Krishna book and compare it to the Sanskrit Bhagavatam, Prabhupada began by summarizing the 10th canto in the sense that he skipped the first, dozen verses of the 10th canto. So the Krishna book begins with the words, "Once when the world was overburdened." And so he begins that way. But after that, after skipping the first few verses, he basically, for the rest of it, just translated all the verses. So it's kind of interesting how he began to do a summary study, but it only lasted like the first page of the Krishna book. And after that, so I'm saying, so once the Krishna book begins with text number 17 of 10th canto, first chapter. It begins with text number 17. And so Prabhupada skipped the first 16 verses, but I think, as far as I know, that was all. After that, he did all the verses. So the idea of a summary study only lasted, the first page of the Krishna book. And after that, so Prabhupada did the 10th canto. He did the 10th canto and in the Krishna book, and then he did the first 15 chapters or so of the 10th canto in his regular Bhagavatam format. So I thought, since Prabhupada has already commented on the 10th canto, why repeat what Prabhupada has already done? My original inspiration in beginning the Bhagavatam work was to complete what Prabhupada had not done, not what he had done. And so that was the reason. Next, last question, Ishananda Seva. It's an interesting name. From Vladivostok. So is the instruction to, quote, represent Krishna consciousness in your own words, unquote, was it a personal instruction to you, or is it something that everyone can follow? I would say it is for everyone that's able to do it properly. I mean, clearly, if you are able to present Prabhupada's teachings faithfully, accurately, in your own language, if in the language of whatever community you come from, then of course it's good if you can do it well and preserve Prabhupada's message intact, and yet, so to speak, translate it not only from one language to another, but to do a type of cultural translation, so that you're saying the same thing, but you're saying it in the culture with which you are familiar. So yes, I would say anyone who can do it properly should do it. So those are all the questions. I was sent these questions by Amala Chandra. And then Ananda Leela is now informing me that there may be some other questions. Let's see. Okay, I'll read that. So the question is, considering the different groups we have nowadays, as mentioned, Tripurari, Narayana, Prema Prayojana, that have naturally mixed with different ISKCON communities over time, what do you think Srila Prabhupada would have advised us, ISKCON members, to do? Do you think he would have changed his mind and encouraged us to take their association, even if they left ISKCON? If those gurus are speaking on the philosophy, what is the harm? Well, the harm is when they speak on a different philosophy. For example, several of the people you just mentioned here, at least two of them that I know of, I don't know, well, actually all of the ones you mentioned, have significantly deviated from Prabhupada's teachings. Prabhupada put as a title of his magazine, Back to Godhead. In the first record Prabhupada made in New York, Prabhupada said, we are all originally Krishna conscious entities. And all three of those people you mentioned, as far as I know, deny that. And so on a very important point of philosophy, they reject Prabhupada's teaching. So what is the harm? That's the harm. That's the harm. And on another points also, on a few points, significant points, they simply reject Prabhupada's teachings. No matter how much they say they love Prabhupada, they don't love him enough to actually follow his teachings. So that's the harm. Okay, I guess that's it. There are no other, I'm sure there'll always be more questions, but not in front of me right now. So I guess I will stop there. Again, special thanks to the Russian devotees. I was very happy to be able to speak with you. And Hare Krishna.